good to be with you. I love seeing the sun. The sun poked out for a minute. It's going to keep coming. We're going to have some sun tomorrow. It's good to be here in Prague. It's been a while. It's been about 9 years, and I'm thrilled to be back. Now, depending on how you interpreted this question, you might be here for a variety of different reasons. But my message is really quite simple. What the take that I take on this question. But regardless of what brought you here, I hope that there's something that you take that's going to make this conversation about Scrum maybe a little bit more effective, maybe a little bit more fruitful and useful in your organization where you may be having some challenges or some opposition to it. But my purpose in asking this question, why not Scrum, is I feel like I'm always on the defensive. It feels like Scrum is always on the defensive these days. And I think that's wrong. I would like to flip that a little bit. And so that's my purpose here. I've been working with Scrum teams for a long time, as I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, have been as well. And they're, especially recently, but we've seen these waves of resistance to Scrum, or people saying, hey, we've been doing Scrum, and we don't like it. We're not going to do it anymore for whatever reason. And in fact, here are a number of those reasons I've heard. I don't know if you've heard any of these yourselves. These represent so many that I've heard, and we could probably take some time going through each one of those and basically refuting it, right? We could probably say, well, they're saying that because of this, or they're saying that because of this, and we could fix that and whatever it might be, right? We could spend all day doing that. And to be honest, and you could probably add some up here, like I said. But I don't know about you, but my response to these is usually this. Well, you implemented it wrong. And that's actually the most useless response I could make to those things about why we don't like Scrum or why we're not doing it or why we tried it didn't work. It's not helpful for me. It's not helpful for the person I'm saying it to. It's not helpful to anybody. All it does is it puts everybody on the defensive. It just reinforces it. I don't know if you've seen this movie. I don't know how popular this is over here in Europe, but Mr. Mom was a great movie of the 80s, and you're doing it wrong. Nobody likes to hear that. And it's not useful to say it. And I would suggest to you, maybe it's because we misunderstand it a little bit. Or maybe said differently, we overthink it. And by we, I'm talking about everybody here in this room, the folks who are expected to understand this and claim to understand it. We tend to go about it in interesting, and I think the way this thought that I've had that we maybe misunderstand it, overthink it, I think it's manifest in the way we try to describe it to others, and especially to others who may be new to it or who aren't sure that they want to do about whether they want to do it. Now, this might be an interesting topic for tomorrow's open space. What's your elevator pitch for Scrum? That could be an interesting topic. Maybe we could put one together. We're not going to do it here in this session. I don't even know if I know what mine is, what my quick 1 or 2 sentence elevator pitch might be. And really, I think it's because, trying to describe something that is simple in few words is actually pretty difficult. Which is kind of ironic. But think about what might your elevator pitch be. Again, I don't know that I've got a great one, but here are some examples of elevator pitches these aren't direct quotes, but these are all examples of maybe some that I've heard or bits and pieces that I've heard from time to time. And again, we could probably spend all day, we could probably spend a half hour on each one of these and go through and dissect. Is that a good explanation of Scrum? Well, this part is, but not this part, and why? Right? There's problems with each one of these up here. But we all try it, and depending on who our audience is, we might try to describe it in different ways. And I think it was Blaise Pascal, 1600s mathematician, philosopher, as he was writing a letter to an associate. He started off the letter saying, "I'm sorry this letter is so long. I didn't have time to make it shorter." Right? It's not usually the way we think. We think, well, we can do things quickly, but we do things long quickly. So it's kind of difficult. It can be difficult to describe things that are simple in just a few words. But here's a few other quick elevator pitches of what Scrum is. Here's from the Scrum Guide. It's pretty good. It better be good, right? It's from the Scrum Guide. That one's pretty good. Here's from Scrum Alliance. I think this one's pretty good. Some good stuff up there. I like the bullet points, right? Those are helpful for me to understand what Scrum is. Or here's what scrum.org says. It is a little longer, but it's only a couple sentences. It's really not that long. But I like each of those for different reasons. But again, not to get into what an elevator pitch is, but with all this said, right, all of these explanations of what Scrum is, what if it actually isn't even about Scrum? Or doing it right, or getting it done perfectly, right? Having the right implementation. Is that really what we're looking for? Is that really what we're trying to accomplish? That said, right, maybe it's not so much about Scrum. What is it about? Well, before I go down that path, let's go down the path of what actually is Scrum. I know this is an Agile conference. You've probably all been through a certified Scrum Master class, but let's review what Scrum is. How much do we forget? This is Scrum. Now, it's based on 5 values, and not to downplay or minimize the 5 core Scrum values. They're vital. But really, Scrum is these 3 accountabilities, 3 artifacts, and 5 events, and that's it. That's really it. And so I find it really interesting when people say, oh yeah, we do Scrum, but, what do we call that? Scrum but, yeah, that's what we call that. Yeah, we do Scrum but. I think it's a really interesting opportunity for a conversation here. So what is it about this very simple, lightweight framework that you feel like you need to get rid of or that you don't need? In other words, what is it? I don't know, I guess that's a small dot, isn't it? What is it about having someone on the team who's empowered to make tough business decisions that you don't want? What is it about having the people on the team who possess the skills needed to take an idea and turn it into something of value that you don't want? Or what is it about having someone on the team who can blaze the trail, right? Create an environment for our team to be successful that you don't want? What is it about working from an overall to-do list and then breaking that down into smaller to-do lists to work on one at a time to completion, and then being able to look at some end result of that small to-do list? What is it about that you don't want? What is it about working in some type of an iterative cycle that you don't want, where you start out and plan what you're going to do during that cycle? Then each day you come together to coordinate the work that needs to take place today, based on the realities you're dealing with. What is it about that you don't want? And then what is it about being able to take what you've completed, review it with your stakeholders, take some feedback, incorporate that feedback into what you're doing, and then find ways to fine-tune and adjust how you're doing that work that you don't want? I think that's a really interesting conversation to have. And by the way, I didn't use any Scrum terminology there. So Scrum but, I don't quite get it so much. Now Scrum and, right? We do Scrum and we also do X or Y or Z. Well, that actually makes all the sense in the world. So let's strip this back just a little bit more. Scrum is based on empiricism, right? Empirical process control. So everything, empirical process control, right? Transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Everything about Scrum, each of those 3 accountabilities, 3 artifacts, and 5 events enable those 3 pillars. That's it. Those 13 pages of the Scrum Guide, that's it. Now, in the Scrum Guide, we also learn about other things, right? So we learn about the product backlog, for instance, and then there's product backlog items, right? There's a mention of those, but there's no prescription on how to go about defining or communicating product backlog items. But there happen to be some of these common approaches out there. We could call them common Agile approaches or generally accepted Agile approaches, right? They're not part of Scrum, but they're options, right? They're patterns that we can use to fill in those gaps. For instance, a lot of Scrum teams will use user stories as a pattern for communicating their product backlog items. It uses that who, what, why pattern. There's a lot of reasons why we would use that. But it's not even part of Scrum. It has nothing to do with Scrum. It's one pattern. You might use a variety of other patterns for your product backlog items, right? And the same thing goes for a lot of other things that are mentioned in that Scrum Guide. But even beyond that, there might be other complementary practices, or we could even just call these good ideas, or in some cases, they're bad ideas, right? Depending on what the situation is. These are things like, I don't know, Scrum teams probably work in a lean environment as well, where they're removing waste. They'll use some set of technical practices to build in quality, right? And in fact, almost every Scrum team I've worked with, they're using Kanban practices within the Scrum framework, right? Visualizing their workflow, limiting that work in progress so they optimize that flow of work through that system, right? So why wouldn't you want to add that as well? Whoops. But that's all Scrum is right here. So we didn't like Scrum. All right, that's fine. That's fine. But even if we understand this whole thing here, right? Why is Scrum still an uphill battle? Should it be? Why is it still an uphill battle? Because Scrum actually isn't really even all that new. It's built on these models that majority of people have been agreeing on for a long time, whether it's the Plan, Do, Check, Act or the OODA loop, right? Or, I mean, I know I've got the Six Sigma thing up here, right? But in other words, what are those 3 accountabilities, 3 artifacts, and 5 events enabling? It's to imagine, create, reflect, repeat. In other words, to quote Tobias Mayer, our friend over in the UK. So still, again, why is it such an uphill battle? Well, I think it's so hard because we've made it about doing it perfectly. As traditional project managers, I was one once, and sometimes I still fall back into that habit of being traditional or upfront design focused, right? We've taken that upbringing of ours, that zeal for process-heavy, our process-heavy upbringing, and we want to get it right. I mean, Scrum, I found Scrum and I fell in love, right? And I wanted it, right? And I can see that if implemented well and perfectly, then it's going to work. And so I want everybody to implement it perfectly, but in that zeal, we miss the point so often. Because we like to say, doing it right is what makes it work so well, right? I wonder if we're getting so prescriptive, that's why even software teams, which is where Scrum was born out of software, it's where the software teams don't even want to do it anymore. They've gotten sick of it, or didn't work for them, or it was overbearing, too prescriptive, whatever they've complained about. So to give us some perspective, I want to share some stories with you. And I'm going to slowly pull us away from software, one story at a time. We'll start within software first. Am I on the right? Yeah, you're seeing it. just kind of peel us away. So I was working with a water utility company, and they had a bunch of tools that they had built internally that they were supporting, where their engineers would use these tools out in the field, right? So they would go out, and these were the folks who were out making sure the water was getting where it needed to go, checking the valves, the pipes, the meters, everything. And they would pull up these tools on a laptop or a mobile device. And one of those was a geolocation application where they could actually survey, pull it up, and from GPS be able to identify where the pipe was buried or whatever. Well, because of mobility and security standards, the current system just couldn't keep up. It was built on old technology, and they finally said, you know what, we need to replace it. And anytime I hear those words, system replacement, I know what I'm hearing. Waterfall. Why is that? Well, because, hey, customer, we're not going to be able to give you anything until we're able to give you everything you were used to previously. That's kind of the mentality and the temptation. Well, this team they saw a different way of working, so right, they came and said, is there any way for us to avoid this? Of course there is. Well, the thing that made this so amazing is they engaged from the very beginning their stakeholders, right? All these people that were using it through road mapping and other techniques, such that these folks came to a sprint review, every sprint, 1-week sprints. Every sprint, attending the sprint review. And that is, I think, sprint review, my opinion, it's kind of the lifeblood. That sprint review with our stakeholders, to continually be course correcting. Well, let me give you a long story a little bit shorter. They thought this was going to be a 2-year project when they first picked it up. 6 months in, at a sprint review, the stakeholders stopped the product owner, said, hey, product owner, hold up. What you've shown us so far, up to date, what you've shown us, if we could have it today, we could do our jobs better than if we continue using the current system. Now, we know there's still a bunch of features in the current system we would have to do without for a while. We're okay with that. What you've given us now is valuable enough. That's what we want. So when can we get it? And they're thinking, oh, you got to wait for another year, right? Well, what was the product owner able to say? You tell me. Right? Everything we've been showing you, it's yours. In fact, we've even been deploying this into a production environment. It's yours because you've helped us course correct. We have delivered your highest value one piece at a time, right? They didn't need to get everything to be able to get anything. So that's one of my favorite stories. Another one is research and development in nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is a pretty serious business, right? We're going to iterate through this. I don't know. Well, and what does research and development look like? Yeah, we research, and maybe we come up with some findings at some point, but we just research, and it's just this continuous spin, right? Well, they'd been doing this for I don't know how many months it was. So we came in and said, well, what if we could start demonstrating something? It's an experiment, but it's actually something we could do. This was for a common engineering environment, so a little bit IT still. But they basically treated every sprint as an experiment, as the scientific method. So sprint planning, they identified what is our first hypothesis. We state that hypothesis. Then they planned the experiments they would run throughout that sprint, 2 weeks worth of experiments. At the end, they demonstrate the results from those experiments. They get feedback on those results. They identify what's the next probable hypothesis we should run. Establish the hypothesis, run it again, run those experiments, right? And so now within 6 months, they actually had stuff that they could play around with and try and see. They actually had those proofs of concept to make a decision on go forward any further or not for that funding. Well, another one is writing a book. Oops, sorry about that. We've actually got several books out there in the marketplace, and we follow Scrum every time. Scrum is perfect for content development. And, well, let me see if this will, okay, yeah, hopefully you can see that. This is an example of how we would not have any books in the marketplace if we did not take this iterative approach. Now, here on the left-hand side is what you would see traditionally what happens. So traditionally, what you send a premise and an outline to a publisher, they approve it for go or no go, and then then you basically write the transcript, right? You write all those chapters section by section, and you submit it, and they either reject it or they accept it. Well, similarly, we started out with basically our product goal and our product roadmap was the premise and the outline. And then we went one chapter at a time, one chapter per sprint. Now, it's interesting, the first chapter, and this was how my co-author did his very first book, and we followed this model ever since. So the very first chapter submitted to the publisher was chapter 7. I don't remember why it was chapter 7. Maybe it was what we thought was going to be the easiest one to write. Submitted that chapter to the publisher. What did the publisher say? She said, I hate it. And here's why. Boom, 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 boom. All right, we took that feedback and we implemented that into chapter 7 as well as chapter 9. We submitted chapter 9 and she said, you know what? I really don't like it so much. She didn't say I hate it. I don't like it so much, and here's why. Boom, 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 boom. Well, that feedback was used for chapter 9 and also for chapter 10. We submit it. She's like, yeah, it's okay. But boom, boom, boom. See the pattern here, right? And then for chapter 8, she's like, it's pretty good, but do this and this. And finally, by chapter 11 got submitted, she's like, I love it. It's great. And we could have even gotten to the end of 24 out of 26 chapters, or however many there were, 22 out of 24, and we might have found those last two are no longer really that valuable to work on. Let's skip them. Let's keep moving. We got enough. Well, here's my most proud that I would like to share with you. Whoops. They look different up there for some reason. So we've got 5 children. Our 3 oldest are girls, 2 youngest are boys. Our middle child is our youngest daughter, and she just started university this year, just a couple weeks ago. Which means last year at this time, she was applying for colleges, and it was stressful. And she actually had 9 universities she wanted to apply to. Well, she had job shadowed me a couple times. She kind of knew what I taught and consulted on, and so she came to me one day early on in September last year, and she said, Dad, this is stressing me out. Can you help me? I was like, yeah, how do you want me to help you? Can we do what you teach? I was like, yes, of course. I know, my chest is proud and brimming, right? So she said, okay, well, walk me through. What would we do here? I said, well, first of all, you are the product owner. This is all about what you are looking for. You're making the decisions. This is your product. Your education is your product. Now, I'm part sponsor. I'm going to be paying for some of this. So I will do that. I'll also serve as your Scrum Master just to help us figure out how we're doing this, okay? And I'll probably be doing some of the tasks. I'll probably be working as a developer. I'm probably going to edit some of your essays, right? Provide some feedback there. I'll probably submit some forms, whatever. And your mom will do the same as a developer and key stakeholder. Let's work on weekly cycles. How does that sound? We'll start on Sunday. We'll finish on Sunday every week. Okay, great. I said, well, first thing you need to do is prioritize. In which order do you want to attend these colleges? So she ordered them, 1 through 9. Well, first thing we did was in our first sprint planning is we took that first college and we broke it down into all the things that she would need to do. We didn't spend time breaking it down on the other ones. What are the things that we need to do to get this application in? Now, this is early September. All of the college applications are due on November 1st. All of them, right? And so what do the students do? They leave them all till October 31st, right? We're not going to do that here. So we did that. It took, 2 or 3 weeks. She got all of those tasks done, the essays written, the editing, everything, and her first college was submitted, done. She's applied. Then she went to the next highest priority one, broke it down, worked through those tasks, got the second one in, third, fourth, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we got to about, it was probably October 25th, something like that. We're approaching the deadline. She came to me one night. She said, Dad, first of all, I'm not being lazy. Okay, you love it when it starts with that, right? I'm not being lazy, Dad. I got those first 7 done. They're all in, they're submitted. I'm real excited. She said, I'm looking at these last 2 here. I mean, everything I've learned from these others, I don't know if I really even want to go to these anymore. They're great schools, but even if I got in, I don't know if I would. She goes, I think I'm done. Right? One at a time, break it down, work through it. That continuous feedback loop kept her continually course corrected and on focus. Had nothing to do with software. Well, the forms we submitted over software tools, but we were not building software or anything even close to it. I love Scrum, but we do not get paid to do Scrum. That's not what we're getting hired to do. We get paid to solve problems. I don't know how many of you were able to be in Dallas not too long ago at Agile 2024. It was great. There were a lot of great thought leaders there. And I remember sitting in a session as a participant with Esther Derby. Anybody ever heard of Esther Derby? Right? So she's written a few books, a few things we probably follow a lot of. Well, she said, you know what, we need to stop talking about Scrum and Agile and talk about solving problems. Scrum is not a solve model. It will not solve any of your problems. It does not solve problems. It enables that transparency, inspection, and adaptation for exposing those problems, and it's up to us to determine what we're going to do about it so that we can solve those complex problems adaptively. So ask questions. Let's start asking questions and speaking more about solving problems. Will Scrum help us get there? Maybe so, but don't start there. What's the problem we need to solve? There's a good chance, though, that I want to do it using Scrum. Bottom line, if you want early empirical feedback in what you're doing, you can take your work and break it down, and you're open to unlearning old habits and being aware, right, and a continuous feedback loop, then why not Scrum? I'm seeing that red line is gone. Thank you very much. Let's talk more in the open space in the hallway.